So, Krista, thank you so much for taking the time to spend this moment with me, recording a little bit of your experience with what's going on with COVID-19 on your neck of the forest, so that those that are going to be looking at this, watching this clip, know who you are and what's your institutional context. Could you give us a little bit of that information?
Yeah, sure. I have two roles. One of my hats is teaching at Sonoma State University, teaching elementary math methods as an adjunct professor. I've done that for like 5 years. And my other role is I'm the director of mentoring for the North Bay for an organization called Trellis Education. And Trellis is an organization that is committed to growing exceptional STEM teachers, so that every middle school and high school student has access to exceptional STEM teachers. And we particularly are thinking about STEM teaching as an act of social justice, and that everything we do in a STEM classroom, and I would say classroom, is an act of social justice or an act of social injustice. So how are we teaching in ways that disrupt racist patterns that are just innate in our society and our systems? And we support with universities and districts. We support STEM teachers from their pre-service year, as soon as they're applied to their credential program and accepted, all the way through their 5th year of teaching, because we know majority of 50% of teachers leave the profession in the first 5 years. We also work in only schools that have a majority population of traditionally underserved students. So students of color, students with economic hardship situations. And we work with universities. We have 4 university partners: San Francisco State, UC Berkeley, Sonoma State, and Cal State East Bay, and then 13 districts, I think, right now.
That's pretty large. How's your organization funded?
Grants at this point, but we also have partnerships with districts, and we're very involved in the California residency program. We have partners with 4 different California residency grants. So, and then we're doing a lot of the helping with some of the facilitation of that program also. And then one of the things, so for example, a pre-service teacher, like their course, they would have a mentor teacher who's highly qualified, who is working at a summer institute and monthly meetings, looking at their own mentoring and how they're mentoring to push equity and social justice in the teaching of their teacher scholar. And we're doing that in affinity spaces with people of color and white folks, and then also in regional spaces like the North Bay, East Bay, and San Francisco. And so that's the pre-service year. And then their 1st and 2nd year, their induction mentors are also then Trellis mentors, so that they are supported all the way through induction. And their 1st year, when they're hired in a district that is a partner with us, they're hired at 100%, but they only teach 4 classes. So their 5th class, they can co-plan, they can go observe, they can reflect, they can catch a breath. So, and then in their 3rd year, we support them with getting their master's and then their national board certification.
Oh, that's fantastic. And then reach their practice, having that 5th course release time available. That's fantastic. In the middle of this practice and workshops and conversations and training, COVID-19 appears in our lives. So what was your experience like? When did you learn? Did you see it coming? Were you prepared when it hit big time? Or what's the situation?
Well, I don't think any of us were prepared in any way. I think we were hearing from different schools and different districts across the Bay Area, how they were, like San Francisco, for example, I think had shelter in place before the North Bay did, and so we just kind of watched different communities, and a lot of, at least my role was talking to 1st and 2nd year teachers or pre-service teachers right away, like, okay, what does this mean for me if I can't go to school on Monday or tomorrow or whatever? So lots of like instant unknown, I would say, for sure.
So at a certain point in time, you had to stay in place, and the rest of your co-workers, I imagine.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think what we did is we decided, we really kind of quickly, like the leadership team got together and started thinking about what does it mean to be mission aligned? What's our mission? And what does it mean to stay mission aligned in this time? And therefore, like, what do we value most? So we did a lot of work on values, and so what does that mean that we're committed to? So I think, like there were a million different messages to teachers and to mentor teachers and to pre-service teachers about what they needed to do. And, yeah. So lots of different messages from districts saying this, and then the next day saying this, and then the next, and we were like, okay, we want to like take a breath and really come to center and like what matters the most here. And so we really kind of worked hard at coming up with a list of values and commitments that were about, like the first one was, we're about, personal health, everyone's safety, food, having food resources, who in our community is at risk for any of those things, first of all, and helping find and meet needs or support people in meeting those needs, which means not creating a Google Classroom right away, but making sure that we call in contact and actually talk to every student, that it's actually not okay to teach a class online if you are missing 20% of your students or even 15%, that's actually unjust and not okay. And so helping teachers recognize, helping us like reevaluate what do we value. So first, physical, emotional safety. Second, that relationship is way important, more important than content. That connecting is crucial. And then third, that we want to elevate, witness, support those families who are, particularly underserved and often, more vulnerable in our society. So that's the number one priority.
Yeah, and this is the reason why I really wanted to get your perspective in the midst of most of the interviews are interviews with educators that are in the classroom, but you're really looking at the big picture here. And one of the things that we're facing every day is that not all of the students that we have sent out with this idea that we just do a new modality are students that are going to be facing hardship and access problems, all kinds of things. This morning I was talking to one student who lives in a rural community. She didn't have the internet, so fortunately there is an association on campus that provided access. Now she's behind and you're working with them, but what you were saying is interesting, and I want you to expand a little bit on it. So faculty would feel institutional pressure because institutions, and rightly so, want to make sure that our business of educating continues, no matter what, because that's what justifies our existence as an institution, right? So we have that pressure. You need to continue teaching, you need to continue interacting. And you have 80 of 100 students that are having access, no problem. Should I stop providing that access to the 80 students because we have 20 students that do not have access? Or is it okay if I just do my best to make sure that those 20 have an alternative way of accessing? What would you say to a professor that is facing that pressure, institutional pressure?
I mean, I think that if we teach to 80% of our students, and I've had in our communities, like I said, we're across the many different, I've had people say, I have, 10 to 15% of my students showing up. And I've had people saying I have 60%. So it's all over the map. But regardless, that percent that isn't showing up, those are the ones that we should be reaching out to. Those are the ones that we should be prioritizing. And I'm not saying, like ignore the 80% that are showing up, but I'm saying this is an opportunity for us to repurpose, reimagine education. And maybe it's not, you know, I teach math methods. I believe it's important. Math is important, and people are more important, and people's hearts are more important, and people's emotional stability, because there are kids, and there are people who I've spoken to are in their master's courses who are like, I can't read this article right now. I can't, you know, and then we're going to expect students to do that. So how are we, maybe what we're teaching right now needs to be completely different. Maybe we need to be teaching emotional resilience. Maybe we need to be teaching how to connect, how to be vulnerable, how to be authentic, how to be a citizen within a home, or whatever the thing is. Like, maybe it's completely different. And maybe this is our opportunity, instead of trying to smush content into a new box in a new window, maybe
in an email.
Yeah, right. Or, oh, we can't, and they don't have access, so we're going to print it out and give kids packets.
Yeah.
This is not quality education. Like, this is our opportunity to totally stop. And even as an organization where we say, here's our values. We value, you know, connection. We value, it's easy for us, even in this time, to get caught up in the, oh my gosh, what are we doing?
So Krista, if I'm one of these instructors that are facing these institutional pressures, and I understand the administrators, they have also obligations, fiscal obligations and systemic obligations they have to respond to. And they are telling me, yeah, we just need to switch modality. And I'm seeing, as you are well saying, that some of the students will be definitely neglected and left behind on this. What would be, if you were in the shoes of that instructor, how would you address your dean, your chair, your administrator, and say, you need to give me some room? How would you do that?
What I feel like I'm learning to do more and more fluently, and what I'm hoping to invite people to do, is to really speak their truth, and to, you know, this is an opportunity to learn how to do that, and to support one another. I think part of my role at Trellis, and even at Sonoma State, because I have a few students who are teaching while they're taking coursework, so they're like doing an intern model or something, giving them permission to know, to search their own heart and say, actually, you know, it's not okay with me to teach to 80% of my students. And it's not okay for me to require content if kids are emotionally and physically in a space not available. I had a mentor, I had a long conversation with a mentor teacher on Friday who, you know, the district is coming up with guidelines for requirements. And one of them is you have to have your video camera on and you have to maintain eye contact. And he and I spoke for a long time about the injustice of that, you know, to require students to allow their classmates into their home and their teachers into their home, you know, and it, on so many levels, is just not okay.
It's invasive.
I mean, it is invasive. And I have a hard time looking at the screen for all that time. To tell kids you have to look at a screen, not fair. And we all have different learning styles, you know, and it's an opportunity. The other thing I tell teachers, mentor teachers, and or faculty is like, nobody has the answers right now. We get to, like, this is the best time for us to say, wait, let's look at this, you know. And I mean, I've had conversations, really hard conversations with folks saying, and you know, I'm sure it's easier for me as a white person to say, actually, we're slipping back into white supremacy conditioning. We're slipping back into ways that we've been conditioned, power over, controlling kids, you know, things like that, by, you know, setting these requirements. And what if we shifted to some more transformative types of ways of being with kids, where it was more about connection, more about empathy, more about compassion, more about collaborative learning. That, you know, like, I think this is the opportunity in my class, in my methods class at Sonoma State, where I'm like, so, let's create this together, you all. You're in your 20s and I'm in my 40s, and you know a lot more about technology, and none of us really know how to do this. So let's figure this out together. Like, what do you need right now?
Yeah.
And being able to ask students what their needs are. What a concept.
What a concept.
But we don't think about that, because we think we have to know the answers, and the institutions need to know, and the principals need to know, and give it down to actually maybe this is more about a collaborative community where we're all learning from one another. Maybe this is the big shift.
Yeah, the weight of even the way we label things like shelter in place is just this assumption, speaking of privilege, that everyone has a shelter in place, that you can go back and just be safe and it's connected and everything is fine and dandy. But the reality is much more complex than that. We know that. Right. So in terms of, I was talking to a professor in Catalonia in Spain, and another one in Mexico, and I found it really interesting that they, of course, were facing very similar challenges. And one of the things that they were emphasizing was the need to continue the interaction with the students. They've used different strategies. How do you feel about that? What are the challenges in terms of keeping the interaction that you're facing, and what are you recommending to your teachers and instructors?
Yeah. I mean, I have friends. I bring groups to Nicaragua every year and do education stuff. So I've been speaking to, this last call was a bunch of folks in Peru and Colombia and Mexico and Nicaragua, and that students don't have electricity, let alone internet.
Camera.
Yeah, right. So that's a whole, and it makes me think too, in some ways. It makes me wonder how we think. And I've been in education for 20 years. I've taught in a Spanish dual immersion school for 15 years, and I've taught middle school and high school. I love education, but somehow we think education is the answer and the only thing kids need during this time. Actually, maybe being with family is what they need. Maybe some freedom to connect with their siblings and their grandparents and their whatever is what they need.
Yeah.
And I think trying to, like I said before, trying to connect with every student or every person in our community is crucial and important. And we've done things like, one of the things we noticed is if I'm reaching out, like if I call all of my students and I don't hear back, or I send a message and I don't hear back from some of them, I need to reflect on, what does that say about my relationship with them, their comfort with me, what I've done in the past to cultivate relationship and trust. And then maybe I need to reach out to somebody else in the community who has a different kind of relationship or a better relationship. Or they might feel more comfortable talking to, or whatever. So it's an opportunity for a reflection, but also using different means, right? So maybe maybe we use some of all of those different technologies that kids are using to connect with them. Maybe we're using Instagram and, whatever, like all the different things that they use. Maybe it's an opportunity for us to learn from them. Okay, what's your platform that you use, and or even engaging students and, hey, has anybody heard from Jose? I haven't been able to get hold of him, and how can somebody else tell me how he's doing, and how, like, what's the best way to get a hold of him, and
meeting them where they are. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
So I know you've mentioned already this, but I think it'll be great if you can take us back to that reflection, because I think it's critical. You mentioned you as soon as the crisis hit, you brought together your leadership team and you thought about your priorities. Would you mind going back to that point and just elaborate a little more?
Yeah.
So what were the priorities that you identify as central in what was the process?
Yeah, we looked at our mission statement, which I'll pull it up so that I can make sure that I'm saying it really well, exactly, precisely.
And we can also share some of the information you want to share on the links that I'm going to be placing below the
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, our mission is around growing and supporting exceptional pre-service middle school and high school teachers in California, so that every student has access to high quality education. So we decided to look at what does this mean during this time, because it looks different when we're all in the classroom. Yeah. So we got together and we kind of listed our values and we wordsmithed them and gave, it took us a week to like really spend time like with partners and then whole group and back and forth, and really looked at what do we value? What does it mean to be mission aligned and vision aligned during school closures? Mm-hmm. And so our first was addressing issues of access to basic human needs. So first and foremost, that's the most important. If we have students who are not getting food or who are worried about shelter, they need support on that level. Yeah. First, before they can begin to think about content. Yeah. I can't think about content if I don't know how I'm going to pay my housing this month. Forget it. Yeah. And the second piece is connection before content. So making sure that we are connecting with every single student or every single member of our community. Mm-hmm. And I think that connection is not just what we've noticed is it's not just reaching out and how are you doing, and if they don't reply, then they're fine. Did it. Actually it means continuing. We made a database of everybody in our community. And if I tried to connect to somebody and still didn't hear back, then maybe I don't have the relationship that's right to connect to that person. And so somebody else in our community can do that. Yeah. And creating multiple ways to connect. We had, happy hours, but we had white affinity spaces online. We had people of color affinity spaces. We had, what are the ways in which you're going to feel comfortable stepping in and talking about who you are. So addressing issues of access to basic human needs, connection before mm-hmm. content, which also means, absolutely not creating the Google Classroom for 80% of my students, not going ahead with all the curriculum for 70% of my students, or even 50% of my students. Mm-hmm. And then the third is we value the existing wisdoms of our focal students and communities, and the opportunity to challenge the status quo. So I'll say that again. Existing wisdom of our focal students. So meaning, and our focal students are the students who are traditionally underserved in our communities. Yeah. We decide what do we need to do to make education the most powerful for them. Mm-hmm. So evaluating their existing wisdom and the existing wisdom of their communities. And we value the opportunities to challenge the status quo. And then, so from those values, then we took a list of what does that mean? Okay, so we commit to what? And we came up with a list of things of what that looks like, what we commit to.
So when you talk about challenging the status quo, could you unpack that a little bit for us?
Well, we know that our systems are built on white supremacy conditioning, and our systems are built to dehumanize some folks and elevate other folks. And so all the time in our classrooms, we talk about how do we notice which are the kids that have the value, that are seen as academically higher or whatever in our classrooms, and which are the kids that we want to acknowledge their competence in powerful ways that reposition them and that disrupt patterns of inequities that happen in our schools. So that's the way we go through all of the stuff that we're doing. We're constantly looking at, our goal is to change this gap in how students are valued and engaged, and whose knowledge is valued and whose contribution is valued, and really shift the dynamics that have been the part of our system since the beginning.
Absolutely.
So right now, in this time of the crisis, that gap is even more profound and really more visible to everybody. Like the conversation is happening in bigger ways than it's happened in my educational experience in 25 years. So this is our opportunity to really disrupt, like this idea of, oh, I'm going to go ahead and teach, even though 20%. And I've heard people say, like, how do I hold kids accountable? And I need to get those parents to get those kids. Yeah, that comes from this paradigm of this level of privilege of not understanding where every kid is.
Yeah.
And I've had people say, well, I things like, I'm not sure what percentage of my students are not here, or well, that should be the number one priority.
So Krista, in my experience, and I want to get your take on this, I've come across educators that would look at this narrative of making visible the gaps, and they would challenge that, saying, yeah, but what that means in reality is that we're going to throw away standards. How do we keep the excellence of our institutions? How do we keep the standards? How do we make sure that the students will be able to address the things that they will need to address when they hit their professional lives? If we continue just looking at the gap, then we're going to end up in a gap, and the standard will go down the drain. So in this concern for the standards, they say, yeah, some kids will be left behind. That's the nature of the endeavor. But other than that, you won't have excellence in education. What would you say to that?
Okay, so I think I can think of that a lot as I don't know the answer now in this time. What I know at this time is that those priorities of relationship and human needs and those things, those are more important to me than the content. And I know we need to get to the content, but I think the only way maybe I can answer this question is like back up 3 months, because I don't know the answer of how we're going to do that at this time. But I would say, gosh, when I taught elementary school, I said, please put all the kids with IEPs in my classroom, because I believe that they can access grade level content. I don't want them pulled out of my classroom. Yeah. I want them to be in my classroom. And if you want to push in a special ed teacher to support, then that's fine. But I think we have this one way of understanding. So for example, in math, we believe about, proficiency and memorization and, all of these things. And in actuality, there are many ways to be mathematically brilliant. Yeah. And in our culture and in our society, we value certain ways of doing that, and we totally devalue other ways of doing that. And I think we can create classroom communities in which all different ways of knowing are valued and supported and nurtured and nourished, and that ways of knowing. I'll never forget. I had a GATE student. We had conferences, and she said to her, this 5th grade, to her parent, she said, "Math is hard this year. It's the first year math is hard." And her mom, who was also the special ed teacher and who was pushed into my classroom, said, "So why is it hard this year?" And she said, "I have to listen to other people and make sense of what they're doing, and I have to explain my thinking, and I've never had to think like this before." And I had kids who came into that class who were identified as RSP, with learning disabilities, and they came in just hunched over and thinking that they were stupid, because they've been taught by our system that these are ways of knowing, and your ways of knowing aren't valued. And by the end of this, within months, those same kids would be saying, "No, let me explain it to you. I'll show you. Here, let me take it," because if my goal in my classroom is to notice and celebrate and elevate all the different ways of knowing, I can help them recognize that their ways of knowing are valued and valuable, and can push our collective understanding together.
Absolutely.
But we don't do that yet. We don't know how to do that in classrooms yet. And so we always have this conversation about the high kids and the low kids, or the kids who are there. That's all our creation. We've created that. And
we're going to start running out of time, time. So before we get there, I want to get a little bit of your perspective. So I think, of course, these are challenging times, weird times, unique times, historically unique times. And in every crisis, one can see the problem, but we can also see the opportunity. So of the things that you're seeing are happening because of the COVID-19 crisis, and the changes in strategies and sometimes scrambling to do things differently, what do you think we should retain of what's working now for future? You mentioned already, it's an opportunity to challenge and to enhance what we're doing. So what do you think we can enhance based on this?
Oh gosh, so many things.
In 3 minutes to go.
So I also heard two different questions. What do we maintain and what do we enhance? I think we can't. I've been doing these visioning experiences with mentors and pre-service teachers and first and second year teachers, where we just do kind of a meditation and we sink into a heart space and we just listen to our heart. And then I do this whole kind of breathing through your heart and all this, just really kind of centering into our deeper wisdom. And then I ask several questions, 5 questions, and I have them write the answers. And then we share them together. And the questions are really about, what if we just put aside everything we knew about education and we got to completely reimagine it with no limits and no boundaries? What would that look like and feel like for you? And then there's some silence and everybody writes. And then the next question is, what do I need to cultivate in my own self in order to help facilitate that happening? What do I need to grow or allow to come through? And then we take some time. And then the third question is something like, what past experiences or fears or whatever keep me stuck in something else? What could I let go of?
Yeah.
And anyway, questions like that, and then we share, and so we're kind of creating together a new possibility, and hearing different people's ideas. I think about how we could, for me, here, kind of my vision is, I imagine classrooms in which each student recognizes their own brilliance and their own wisdom and their own wholeness, and is able to share that in the classroom, and where students recognize the brilliance and wisdom and wholeness of each other, and all completely different as the way in which I can grow together, that we can grow together. That's what I think could happen in education. Anything could happen, but what if we completely, what if that was the goal? Or something like that, that's my thing. But what if that was it? And what if we were all working towards a place, classrooms where, my passion, every student's passion gets to be cultivated, and we spend so much time on deficits. What if, I don't think kids even know what they're passionate about. I know a lot of adults that don't know what their passions are. What if we practiced noticing what brought life to our lives?
That is fantastic. Krista, we could be speaking I suspect for another hour, solid hour, but I really want to thank you for your time, for your wisdom, for your perspective. And I look forward to keeping track of what you and your organization are doing up there, so that we can learn and continue also enhancing our practice over here. So thanks a lot, and my appreciation.
Thank you. Thank you.